Okay, welcome back to the Beta Project. I'm Tom Tronto. You're watching Trials Progression, where I take trials techniques and break them down into smaller bite-sized pieces. That way you can practice and drill and put them all back together. If you guys want more information, you can visit the website or the app Trials Progression. Today we're going to be getting into turning and body posture and body positioning on the bike as it relates to turning and how important it is to stay centered on the bike. So I've actually prepared some notes, so I'm going to be referencing those as we talk through this. Turning here on the flat driveway, it's a great place to develop good habits. However, you can get away with a little bit more because the traction's always there. There aren't the roots and rocks and mud and little cambers that can make things more challenging when you're out in the wild. But we want to put in some good disciplined practice to work on our postures that when we take this out into the woods, we can be more successful. So let's start out and just talk about why we lean on those bars. It's so common to put excessive weight on the handlebars. I think the first reason is just because it's easier to balance. When you put excessive weight on the bars more than is needed, you can get away with more. If you're not quite as controlled with the finesse of the clutch and the throttle, if you give it a fistful of throttle, you're not going to fall off the back. So it's easier to balance when you're weighting those bars more as it relates to front and back balance. The next one I would say is just simply leg fatigue. A lot of us lack good leg strength. It's hard to stay in a nice kind of stance with our knees bent and ride the bike. So it's easier just to stand up, knees straight, and lean on something. We do this with countertops and kitchens and shopping carts. We all tend to just lean on things because it helps hold up our upper body. And then finally, I think we lean on things and we tend to force things with our hands just because we're human. We all learn to do things with our hands, and so we think about steering a motorcycle by just forcing a turn and using our hands. So we lean on the bike, which then causes us to want to force a turn a little bit more with our hands. By forcing a turn with our hands, we're steering, just like you would steer a car or a truck. But a trials motorcycle is different. Instead of steering it with our hands, we're going to lean the bike. It turns because we lean it, and we lean it with peg pressure. So by lifting up a little bit on the right, I'm going to be putting more weight on the left. Putting more weight on the left is going to start to cause that bike to lean. As it leans, it starts to turn. Now, another thing that happens when you lean on the bars and try and turn is that you typically push or wash that front end. In addition to that, you might lose traction on the rear because you have too much weight on the front. Now, another reason we might have bad habits is just from other motorcycle disciplines. I know when I was learning to ride on a street bike, in order to turn, they would just say just push down and forward with this handlebar, and that's going to force a little bit of counter steering. It's going to lean the bike, and then I can make my turn. So I learned how to turn by pushing down on the handlebar. That's not what we're after here. We're not trying to push down on the handlebar. In addition to that, if we're talking about dirt biking, you know, it's sitting farther forward on the seat. So I'm getting my butt way up nice and forward to get more weight on that front end. I am not a motocross guy, so I can't get into more detail than that. But again, trials is different. So coming from other motorcycle disciplines can somewhat be a disadvantage because you've got to learn new techniques. You got to learn new body positions as it relates to turning. Now, I want to talk for just a moment about a couple concepts as relates to triangles within the motorcycle riding framework. The first of which is going to be the triangle that's made with each of my hands on the handlebars, going across, coming up through my arms into my shoulders and head. This triangle, so to speak, is something that's really important. In order to balance on the motorcycle, you can't dip the top of the triangle out too far to the side. As you do, the whole bike starts to lean. You and the bike start to lean, and you cause a lean angle. Now, if you give it more gas on the lean angle, you can maintain that turn, no problem. But this is trials, we're riding slower. So the more I dip my head to the outside, the more I got to give it gas to compensate, and that's just speed I don't want. So the total angle of you and the motorcycle is going to lean just a little bit to make a turn. I think you guys know this. It's just between like maybe 0 and 5% lean angle. If you're doing a different motorcycle discipline, you might be able to turn and crank out something, you know, at 30, 40% turn. Those MotoGP guys are hanging way off the side, just turning around really fast. But this is trials. This is totally different. So we want to keep this triangle with my head basically centered over the contact patch of the tires. So that's one aspect. The bike itself can lean, but I'm still going to keep this head over the contact patch of the tires. So now this triangle is just shifting a little bit, but my head is still kind of centered over that contact patch. Now the next triangle that I'm going to talk about is the one that relates to my hands, coming up to my shoulders and down to my feet. I can put more weight on my handlebars, and then my head, the top of the triangle, is going to be coming closer towards the front. That's way different than if I stand up on the bike with my legs straight and my weight's on my feet, and that's even slightly different than if I squat my knees down. So if I'm standing up nice and tall, the triangle is fairly tall, and that's different than if I bend those knees a little bit. Now I'm getting a little lower center of gravity. It makes balancing a little bit easier, especially when we're dealing with other aspects of a turn like roots and rocks and things that might throw you off. And it also just provides the proper pressure to the correct point. So I want to be standing on my feet, giving good pressure to the pegs instead of the handlebars. All right, so how are we going to solve this problem? Well, one way is to start turning with proper body position, and in order to do that, we're going to break those triangles. So instead of being able to put quite so much weight forward with our hands, if I take away a hand, all of a sudden it's going to be really hard to hold myself up with just one arm. In addition to that, the triangle that we had as we faced forward, 1, 2, 3, if I get rid of a hand, suddenly that triangle is completely broken. I have to stand on my feet. I've got to put weight through the pegs in order to maintain upward position on this bike. So we're going to be working our way towards letting go of one hand. So without getting too radical in my turning stance, I'm not going to squat like crazy. I'm just going to find something comfortable with my feet on the outside edge of the pegs. I'm not standing on the peg brackets, but on the pegs themselves. Gives me a little more balance. I'm going to try and make this turn, and I'm going to actually have to increase my speed just a little bit in order to keep the clutch from grabbing. So here we go. Speed is up a little bit. Now before I try and let go with one hand, I'm just going to try and put 2 fingers on the handlebar. Putting 2 fingers on the handlebar, the left handlebar, allows me to still lean on it. I can still pull back a little bit on it. So even if I have a throttle impulse, that's, whoa, a little too fast, I'm still holding on with these 2 fingers. I took my glove off to hopefully help you guys see exactly what I'm talking about. Once you got the hang of doing circles, you want to go ahead and start doing figure 8s. It's probably going to be easier to turn to the left because your right hand is supporting. So going around to the right, in my opinion, is a little bit harder. Just have a little less support on that outside edge. Remember, we're trying to initiate the turn with peg pressure. So we're going to go ahead and lift up on one heel, which puts more weight on the other as I make this turn. So 2 fingers to start out with. So the next progression of this drill, I'm going to go ahead and put my left hand on the outside edge of the handlebar. I'm just going to hold on to that bar end. This is going to give me a little bit of freedom. I can go ahead and squeeze that handlebar a little bit, sideways, and now I can push down or lift up, and if I lose my balance, I'm still kind of holding on, or as I get better, I can kind of open that hand up, so it's a little bit less of a cupping motion, and now it's just flat against there. Now I still might be able to lean on it a little bit, and eventually I'm just going to open that hand up and have even less pressure there. The less pressure I can have with my left hand, the more I'm breaking that triangle, the more I'm standing on my feet, the more I'm balanced. Now if you don't have good throttle control and you're not giving it just gentle little bits of input, it can be hard to maintain balance. I would start out with figure 8s that are nice and big. Just take it slow, take it easy. I'm not usually even giving it any gas, I'm just allowing the bike to idle. I would always go into the wet map on the bike if you have one. It just makes that throttle response a little bit slower and more gradual, a little more retarded, which can help with that ease of transition. So we're going to try and make some of these turns with this hand just on the side of the bike, ideally figure 8s, but you can start out just turning in circles. However, you're probably going to start turning to the left. That's when it's easier. We want to make sure we can turn both ways, and turning to the right is usually a little bit harder. So I would encourage you to actually practice twice as many turns to the right, because for most of us, that's going to be more difficult. All right, so we're just going left-handed turns, my hand on that outside edge of the handlebar, and if I give it a little too much gas, whoa, I can just kind of grab on, cup a little bit with that hand right there, or if I need to use the brakes, I'm not using the rear brake at all. I got my feet nice and wide on these pegs. Okay, just cupping the end of that, and as I get more comfortable, I can just start holding the edge. But I want to go ahead and turn figure 8s. This is the easy way, going around to the left-hand turn. So let's practice some right-hand turns. Now suddenly the base of that triangle is even closer together because the right hand is the only one that's really doing the supporting. This left hand's just kind of guiding things along. So this right hand tends to be a little bit more challenging. You can lean that air box up against your right calf. That definitely helps. All right, so let's try figure 8s. Just holding on to the end of that bar. The transition between the 2 turns is going to be key. That's usually where you lose a little bit of that stability, a little bit of that balance. You can still do this with your tether on in case you do fall off. Just very minimal impulses with the gas. Just nice and easy, nice and smooth. We're only going for like 0 to 5% throttle. Really barely giving it any throttle as needed. All right, once you got that, it's time to try it with one hand. Now, one hand is definitely going to be pretty hard. It's going to feel a little bit scary. I would encourage you to keep that hand nice and close to the handlebar just to keep the rest of your brain intact and feeling like you can grab onto it if you need to. The right hand turns, remember, those are going to be a lot harder than the left hand turns just because that triangle is a little smaller, the base of it. So we're just keeping that hand nice and close in case I need to grab it. I usually, when I'm standing up too tall on the right hand turn and then dipping my head in just like that. Woo! This is hard. Good leg workout too as I'm trying to maintain proper body form and stay in balance and not lean on those bars so much. That's the goal here. We're trying not to lean on those bars. Now, even in this left-hand turn, I can kind of lean on that bar. I can put maybe 10, 15 pounds, 20 pounds of pressure into it. But when I make this right-hand one, it is very hard to do this and lean on the bars because then I'm going to be turning faster and having to give it more gas. So there it is. That's the simple solution for getting rid of the body posture that tends to lean on the bars. We're going to go ahead and take this drill out into the wild onto a slight camber in the next video. But for now, let's just practice in our driveway. Let's get good at turning and not leaning so much on those bars. Remember, just to take it in stages, couple fingers, hand on the outside cupping, hand just real gently there, and then potentially even one-handed. Now, if you're newer to trials, this might be a lot. Okay, you might not have the precision and the throttle control right here to be able to do this properly. Safety, safety, safety. Please don't wreck your bike and blame me. Make sure you got a nice wide open space. I would encourage you to check out the additional video that I have on one-handed turns for warm-up. There's a bunch more as it relates to this one-handed type stuff. I'm getting this content from Ray Peters. He is one of the masters as it relates to turning. If you guys live here in the US and have taken one of his clinics, you know about that. So this stuff, I'm trying to share with you the things that I've learned, and I'm working on my body position because I have a tendency to lean too far forward as well. So we're not alone in this. We're hopefully learning and growing together as it relates to your trial skills. Remember, you can check out trialsprogression.com as the website or the app to get even more. Thanks for watching.